We move on to the next session, and it's called Epic Crimes, How Mythology Keeps the Score. So the ones who had more questions for Reena Puriji, keep them coming. Mythology is filled with betrayal, revenge, moral conflict, and mystery. Please welcome mythology writer Madhavi Mahadevan and Reena Puri of Amar Chitra Katha in conversation with poet Mani Rao.
Wherever I go, usually I don't know what people expect as an answer, but they ask me, "What do you do?" And I try not to say I write poetry. I try not to say that, and sometimes I might say, "Yeah, I'm interested in the Vedas and in tantra and religious studies," and they just stare at me. And like 5 seconds later, they just like suddenly face blossoms and they say, I also love mythology. It's my turn to stare. And then they say, my kids love mythology also. You know, I'm not going to prick their bubble. And I'm not going to say, that it's full of crime, right? Yeah. So I don't do that. I just let it be and, match that pious smile I'm getting and carry on with it. But today, we are going to prick some bubbles, if there are any still left after 1 day, 1.5 days of talking about this. We have two really experienced people with us. Madhavi has written numerous books on stories from the Mahabharata, and Reena, as you know, is a pretty large culprit of shaping minds of youngsters with stories from mythology. Um, so, my first question, where there's politics, power, kissa kursi ka, lust, greed, all of that, there's bound to be crime. And mythology is no exception to that. I want to start off with basically the title of our discussion, the theme of our panel discussion. Um, when we come across characters who seem to be having a rough time or who are going through some kind of what looks like punishment, and then later on we find out that there's like some backstory to why they are going through this, and we don't know it at first because then all our empathy comes to the forefront, etc. Do you think you could share with us some examples, like some really classic examples of this terrible thing that happens, but actually they are actually guilty because of whatever they've done? Whoever wants to start, Reena?
Sure. So yes, that's true. There's a lot of there are a lot of stories, and there are a lot of backstories, and they all add up. In fact, Hindu mythology is like a big circle. Everybody's connected to everybody. All the whatever happens is happening for a reason, or whoever is punished is being punished for a reason. So as I said in the earlier panel, even the gods are not spared. Even they do commit mistakes, and they go through the karma cycle. So this is about about Vishnu. Vishnu was born as the Dashavatar. 10 avatars he took on the earth. And in each avatar, he had to go through the whole cycle of, being there, fighting evil, and becoming a mortal, having all mortal emotions and, weaknesses, and dying at the end of it. Both Ram, of course, is lifted to the heavens. Krishna meets his death. So why did this happen? Why did Vishnu have to go through these avatars? We know that he was fighting with evil. Like good had to triumph over evil, and every time evil became too, strong in the world, he would take an avatar and come down. But why was he given this task? So it goes back to sage Bhrigu. Sage Bhrigu actually had cursed him. And why did he curse Vishnu? It was because Bhrigu was, was the father of Shukracharya, who was the guru of the Asuras, right? And when the asuras were in danger from the devas once, the devas were pursuing them and slaughtering them, they ran to Brigu and his wife Poloma and asked for safety. They asked them to give them safety. So Brigu was not there. Sage Brigu was not there in the ashram. It was only Poloma who was there. And she hid all of them. So the sage's wife hid all the asuras. And then when the devas come, Indra comes and he goes to Vishnu and he says, look at this. Brigu's wife is hiding all of them. Please do something. Please get rid of her. So Vishnu uses his Sudarshana Chakra and he beheads Poluma and kills her. And then the devas come in and they slaughter the asuras and they get victory. But when Brigu comes back and sees that his wife is dead, he curses Vishnu and says, for doing this, you will be born 10 times on the earth. You will have to go through every cycle. You will have to suffer and you will have to be born again and again to fight evil on earth. So here is a backstory, Mani, where even a god is given, a punishment for a crime that he has done.
It's a twisted punishment, though.
Yes.
It's a twisted punishment. I mean, at the end, there's a purpose why he comes and he elevates humanity, etc., etc. And it's not too bad, actually, when you really think about it. I mean, where's the... If you're a Matsya, I mean, there's no old age.
No, there's no...
Sickness and old age. It's not really a punishment.
No, but as Ram Avatar,
Yeah.
Okay.
and
Krishna.
even Krishna.
Your mic is
Sorry,
not on.
sorry. Is it?
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah.
Can
Hold it
you
closer, yeah.
Okay.
Closer.
Okay. So yes, there is punishment, and even gods are not exempt from the law of karma. That's a cosmic law. The thing is, coming to earth, that is the punishment. Mortal life is the punishment. And when we say life's a bitch, that's something the gods understood completely. It really was something awful to come to earth. That's something they don't want. There's another example of...
Though I would say the opposite is true because they keep committing crimes, so they want to come.
Yeah, they see in the realm in which they live, they have it so good that there is a kind of sense of entitlement which comes in, because there is another story about the 8 Vasus. Vasus, as you know, are celestial beings. You can call them energies which control things like the wind, the rain, the fire, and so on. So there are 8 of them, and they're a little, they hang out together, and so do their wives. I mean, they're a little club of their own. And because the Vasus are powerful in their own right, when one of their wives says that, I would really like to have Sage Vashishta's cow. Now, cows are very sacred, very divine in that realm for reasons. And she says, I would like that cow. Now, there's no reason for her to have that cow. She just likes it. And the Vasus say, oh, sure, you like something? Let's go and, let's go and get it. And they take the cow, literally sort of untie it and take it away. And because they can. See, so the element of power, as Mani said, where there is power, there is crime, even though it's not seen like that. It's just exercise of power. So they take the cow away, and when Vashishta finds out, he is, of course, furious, and he punishes all of them. So what is the worst punishment that he can give? Go to Mrityulok. Come to the world of the mortals. So they, because there are 7 who were collaborators, there was one who was the mastermind. And that mastermind is the one who is going to get the toughest punishment. So 7 are sent, and they, of course, all of them cry and say, sorry, we are sorry. Please do something. We don't want such a hard punishment. So he says, all right, you'll have a very quick existence. You'll just go and you'll come back. You'll be delivered. Which is how they go to Ganga, because she is the liberator of souls, and ask her to be their mother. And as you all know, everybody knows the story, so I mean, you will 100% know. She is the reason she comes on earth as a maiden, marries the king Shantanu, and this is the start of the Mahabharat, the entire war. So the first, now here's another crime, but this is of course Ganga who is doing it, the goddess herself. So it's not considered a crime when
Or rather, she knows why she's doing
she
it.
knows why she's doing it. So she drowns her first 7 babies. But the 8th one, who has been given the toughest punishment, the Vasu Prabhasa, is told that you are going to live a long and very difficult life on earth. And he is the boy who grows up as Devavrat, who later becomes Bhishma. As you know, Bhishma is the start, in some ways the start point, and also in some ways the reason for the entire war. So now the question comes, what is it that, why is this karma, why is this life treated as something which is a harsh punishment, particularly for Bhishma? So there are 2 ideas here. One is, of course, the idea of karma, which we talked, and the other is the idea of samsara. At some point in the Upanishads, these 2 ideas came together. And the whole idea of karma being something which is transgenerational. It goes on and it doesn't end with you, the consequences coming to you alone. The consequences ride through the waves of time and affect future generations. This is one particular episode of an example of
Yeah.
how the cosmos keeps the score.
Yeah, and Reena, remember the very basic example of how what Rama does, and therefore how does Krishna die? Could you give us that little chain reaction over,
Yes, of
not
course.
just like over avatars?
Yeah. So here is Rama, and he has reached Kishkinda. And what does he have to do there? He promises Sugriv that he will get rid of Vali. Yes? And Hanuman fights with Vali. And Rama tells him that I can't make out who is who. So please, you must wear a garland so that I can know which of you is Sugriv and which of you is Vali. And during that fight, while Vali's back is towards Rama shoots an arrow and kills him. Now, this is not done. No Kshatriya ever shoots from the back. That's the wrong thing that Rama did. And for that, how did he pay for it? Well, not as Ram maybe, but in the next avatar, as Krishna, he pays for it. When Gandhari sees all her children dead, she curses Krishna, saying that you will also die. And Krishna also meets his death. But how? Krishna is lying down in the forest, and there's a hunter who shoots an arrow thinking it's a deer and hits Krishna's ankle, and that's how Krishna dies. But who is this hunter? He's a reincarnation of Vali.
So 2 different crimes get
Yes.
settled with one score. One
Yes.
is Gandhari, who curses for the
Death of her
ending death
children.
of the clan, and the other one is like sort of a backlog from a previous avatar, which now catches up.
Right.
So these are like pretty major examples that tells us that you do something wrong and it's going to catch up, right?
Absolutely.
And but if it's going to catch up in the next janma, do you really care so much? I don't know. But
I think, the point is that think of the idea of janma, think of the idea of birth and death and the life in between. If just, with the Bhishma, what is Bhishma's life? He knows what dharma is, yet he lives in a world where there is adharma all around, and he is helpless. I mean, everybody knows the story of how he sits in the court and says, when Draupadi asks him, and he says, dharma is subtle. That's no answer. That is no answer to the question she asked. But that is because the man is helpless and he's watching his future generations. I don't think there can be any suffering greater than that.
But I mean, that brings me actually to the flip side of the question is, what about all the punishments that are uncalled for? or where we don't get explanations. Okay, so we've got an explanation that the hunter is because, this is Vali reincarnated, blah, blah, or okay, Bhishma did this really bad thing. He released a cow. But what about all the crimes that seem like really uncalled for? Like, what the punishments that don't match? The imbalance between what happens and the lack of a backstory. Could you share some examples of like what really annoys you? What is it that really irks when you read mythological stories and you say the why? I'm not getting an answer why. Tell us some of those annoyances.
See, I am not a mythologist as such. I am a writer of mythofiction, which gives me a little more space to treat the mythology, the actual story, more as a situation, a what if situation. And I think, before these stories were written down and became like a granth or a canonized, that was the purpose of these stories are all exist like moral wounds in our society to make us ask these kind of questions. I mean, the idea is to keep questioning. It's only that once they are put down, they become like a text.
But name it. Tell us.
Okay, for instance, one particular story, which is the story of Renuka. I don't know how many of you know that there is, I mean, you will know that there is a story of Parshuram, one of the avatars of Vishnu, who beheads his own mother. Now, I think in any society, in any time of the world, beheading your mother or your father is, or beheading anyone, but definitely these two who bring you into the world, is a crime by any stretch of imagination. But in this particular story, Parshuram does it at the order, behest of his father, who is a sage. Jamdagni gets angry with Renuka because he feels that her mental and purity. A woman was expected to be mentally and physically pure, which meant that she could not allow even an impure thought to enter her mind. And in this particular episode, Renuka is accused of, she watches a Gandharva making love with his partner, and her job is to carry this pot of water to the ashram every morning from the river, fill it with, it's a pot made of sand. Now and it's her purity which holds the sand together, keeps it like a pot, and she can carry this, she can do this ritual every day. On this particular day, she sees this sight, and maybe there is a passing thought in her head, but when she reaches the ashram, the pot collapses in front of everybody, and her husband, Jamdagni the sage, is furious. And he calls her 4 sons. He says, first one, behead your mother. The son says, how can you ask me to do such a thing? No, turned to ash. Of course, he's a sage, so he can do it. Mm-hmm. Second son, turned to ash. So 3 piles of ash. Now comes to the youngest son, who is Ram, who is also called Ram. But that's before he lifted the axe and beheaded his mother, probably. But, he says, do it. And son says, okay, father. And he beheads his mother. Now, this is a controversial story. Of course, the father is very pleased with him. And the first thing Parshuram does is say, please restore my mother's head. Now, this is, even though this is the version which is there in the Mahabharata, the local versions don't accept this. This is why we have the goddess Yelama in Karnataka, who is part Renuka, part another.
This whole pattern of beheading, decap.
Decapitation.
Decapitation. And then, okay, you can become a deity after that and be worshipped is quite a common theme. There is another character, Ghatotkacha's son, Barbarik, who's a Berber, and he has 3 arrows from Shiva. And Krishna, is it Krishna who asks him, who's afraid that he's going to take the side of the Kauravas, because Barbarik is such a cool person that he wants to only fight on the side of the losers. And Krishna is afraid that if he takes the side of the Kauravas, the tables will be turned upside down. So he says, I want your head. and he cuts off his head and gives it to Krishna. And later, he says, I'm so pleased with you. What do you want? He says, I just want to watch the battle. Can I watch what goes on? This is one of the coolest personalities, in my mind. And I actually got to know about this from a song in a taxi somewhere in the north. There is a temple in Rajasthan called Ghatu Shyam. And that's where apparently that head was kept. And it's a huge pilgrimage spot. And there's all these famous songs, by Chotu Ram, I think. Chotu Ram.
I didn't know this at all.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like
the song.
teen baan ke dhari,
Yeah, he's called.
तीनों बाण चलाओ ना, मुश्किल में है दास तेरा, जल्दी आओ ना. It's amazing, totally amazing song. So I mean, there are all these characters. It always starts with the head being cut off, and then what? Like really, what do you do after that? You become a god.
Yeah. But yeah, it's still one of those. It's the disproportionate punishment.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy that you told us something new and you didn't tell us the Draupadi story, the Sita story, the Lakshagraha story. I mean, because those are more commonly, I'm sure that they're kind of all pulling behind your main story. Could you also tell us something to be a little bit indignant about?
To be indignant about.
So many of them.
Yes.
Let's follow the Renuka line.
Okay.
Like who else? I mean, who are all? But there must be like thousands of women characters in.
Maybe not
Mythology.
beheaded, but
Okay.
turned into stone.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's Ahalya, who is Gautam Rishi's wife, who also, I mean, she is accused by her husband. I mean, Indra comes actually to the ashram when Gautam Rishi is not there, and he takes on the form of Gautam Rishi, and he makes love to Ahalya. Now, this is the version that is known. There are other versions as well. But let's stick to this one, in which Ahalya really doesn't know. And so when Gautam Rishi comes back and finds them, he curses her and he turns her into stone, says that, you're an unfaithful woman, you're not being loyal, and I turn you into stone. And of course, Indra gets the lighter punishment. And he's sent away with, he's given numerous eyes on his body. That's what we tell the children to start with.
Yeah.
Eyes on his body, that's the punishment he gets. But Ahalya turns into stone. And she's supposed to stay in that, then he feels sorry for her. All of them give curses and then they feel sorry about it. And then they know that they can't retract.
Yeah.
So then they come back and try and make it a little lighter. And then he says that, when Ram comes, when the Ram avatar comes, then his foot will touch the stone and you will, come back. And we all know that Ahalya comes back to life at that point. And Ram then convinces Gautam Rishi that she's actually very chaste. And then Gautam Rishi, of course, magnanimously takes her back.
How does infidelity become a crime only when women sort of seem to indulge in this?
I think that is quite prevalent.
Is there
even
like a
today. I
starting
mean,
point for this trend?
See, well, when I was looking at the Renuka story, I did find out that her husband, Jamdagni, was who accuses her. I mean, he says, not even in thought can you have an impure thought about, to just what you just saw. I mean, you can't even watch porn, is what he's basically saying to her. It's not allowed. So the thing is that his great grandfather, one of his forefathers, is Brigu, who sort of collaborated in the writing of the Manusmriti, which has got a lot of stuff in it about what women can and cannot do. So these things have come in at different, how these things evolve. Things are added into, what. And so that's how the idea of women's infidelity is completely not acceptable at all. Even the stain of it should not be there, as happened with Sita. But the men can do it any number of times. And Indra is a
And they must.
and Indra is a serial offender in this. I mean, Indra does so many wrongs. Firstly, is the identity theft. He steals. He comes in as Gautam Rishi. Then he sort of.
Coveting what belongs to another.
Yeah, everything. So all the sins are there, and then the punishment is so light, and that poor woman is like, left as a block of stone.
In fact, the punishment is something he can flaunt.
Yeah, yeah, he can. Yeah, he can say that.
I mean,
yeah.
the number of the cases of crimes against women, I mean, they'll just fill volumes. You could have like an entire Amar Chitra Katha series on it. You know, you could.
You could.
Hidimbi, Ulupi, Chitrangada. I mean, there's like a whole list of things. But I'll tell you something. Women do get back. And they get back by cursing. They get mad. They get mad and they take, they like, what did Gandhari do? Cursed, mad. I mean, there's of course also the angry Brahmins. That's another theme in itself. But there's the angry women theme, because when they get angry, they can sort of like really hit back. Can you tell us some colorful story about it?
No. Stories, everybody knows the same stories, but I
Okay.
would just like to make a point here that
Okay.
an angry man or an angry Brahmin or an angry husband, somehow that anger seems very justified. I mean, it's treated like that. We read it like he has a full right to be angry. Even a suspicion. There will be enough people who will tell you that because this is an argument. Why did Ram send Sita away on just mere suspicion, just a fake news of that time that that the Dhobi said something, so so this is it. How can you do such a thing? But the point is that a man can do this anytime, and he can be. Ram, of course, doesn't get angry. He's very cool about, he's very calm about what he does, and there will be any number of people even today who will argue that what he did was absolutely right. I'm not getting into that. What I'm getting into is the idea of the angry woman. Even today, there are people, of course, things have changed, but as a child or whatever, I used to hear it all the time that Draupadi is like one bloodthirsty woman who swears that she is going to destroy. And there are people who will still, when these discussions go on in families and all, that Draupadi was the cause of the war. It's not that at all. They forget what happened to her. It's only now, after books like Palace of Illusions and so on, that it's now in our consciousness that what happened to her was part of a rotting system altogether, and she had every right to be angry with that system.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just maybe complicate this anger theme a little bit. It's not like women are completely innocent either. I mean, you take Kunti, for example. I have to bring up Kunti because Madhavi has written this amazing book called Kaunteyas, which is one of the first books I read by Madhavi, and I was like telling 20 people about it the same day. What is this with Kunti?
Yeah.
I mean, explain her.
No, she is very complicated. When I wrote the Kaunteyas, I was, I had one vision of her. Over time, my own ideas of Kunti have changed. We can have a very long discussion, but Kunti she has a very dark side to her, and I think maybe all mothers who are single mothers, perhaps, alone in the system with everybody out to get them and their children, may develop the dark side. It's part of that survival instinct, not that it is justified, because some of the things that Kunti does, and I can think of at least 3, maybe possibly even a 4th, are complete. I'm going to tell you, just 1 minute. Well, first, of course, is the when she is born, her son is born, Karna, the first child, she just floats him away. Of course, there is the reason that it's for the clan's good and everything.
It was only an experiment.
Yeah, it was only, yeah, right. Now we will say definitely that, but that is something which cannot be justified. Okay. Number 2 is when the Pandavas are sent to the Laksha Grah, the house of lac, which has been specially built for them. She knows, they all know that this is their death trap. This is the house of death. It's going to be set aflame any time. But they also know that they have to show that they are dead. They hatch their own counterplot. This is what Duryodhan's plotting to get them out of the way. So what does Kunti do? One fine day, when she is just doing her duty, she sees these 6 tribals, a mother and 5 sons, coming in and asking for food. And she says, all right, I'll give you food, and then tomorrow there'll be work for you. Stick around. And that night, coincidentally, the fire happens, and the Pandavas who have planned their escape route escape. And 6 bodies are found of the mother and those 5 sons. Now, this is premeditated murder of 6 tribals. It's not even, in folk literature, and it is probably questioned, but not in the Mahabharata. So here is where this is a bigger crime probably than floating her son away. Okay, then in today's context, I would say that when you know that your son who has gone for 5 of your sons have gone for the Swayamvar. One has come back with the princess. She is married to one. And this news reaches you before the princess arrives in your house. And then you turn around and say, look, whatever you people have brought, please divide it amongst yourselves. And the sons are saying, Mother, we brought a bride. How do we divide? And then you turn around and say, sorry, but what I have said has been said. And therefore you follow. And there is always a hint in the Mahabharata that she knew jolly well what she was saying when she made Draupadi the common wife of 5 sons. And that is something which I think even at any point of time that becomes a crime. The fourth, which I feel, is of course the way she forces Bhim to marry Hidimbi and abandon her. So and her idea is very clear.
Which is in another book that she's written about it. Yeah.
So
it's called The Forgotten Wife.
Yeah, because Hidimbi was the first wife of the Pandavas. She married Bhim. And this is Kunti working again. Marry the Rakshasi, her son will be born so strong, he will fight on our side. So she knows there's going to be a war in the future. And she's already making the plans for it. So she's such a cold-blooded strategist that when I read them, when I work with them, I felt very uncomfortable that this is what she is. But we accept it.
Fascinating. Now, because it's not just about storytelling, it's also trying to understand why or what is actually going on. I mean, you will notice that we're all wearing black and white here. So we think we're some kind of sleuths of some sort, But with a touch of red for the crime theme, So now the thing is, I find that there's heroes and, all these characters who some of whom may have one god as a parent and a human as another parent. But there are 2 basic categories. There is human beings, which obviously we can't say, well, that's full of crimes, because we know that crimes are rampant and that's kind of what they do when they're grabbing for power or lusting after somebody or whatever. But what about the gods, The gods are a different category themselves. And there too, you have this whole power struggle. You explained how when the Asuras were being mauled and they ran to get protection. And the reason they're being mauled, or the reason that there are also stories where they are basically conned.
Yes.
They're completely conned by the
yes.
gods. Tell us some misdeeds of the gods.
So the main one, which I think everyone knows, is the churning of the ocean. When the Devas conned the Asuras into joining in the churning, because the Devas knew that they wouldn't be able to do it by themselves. So they conned them, saying that we are going to get Amrit out, and then we'll share it and we'll all become immortal. And the Devas and Asuras both churn the ocean, and you get the Amrit out. And then the Asuras, of course, want their share. So along comes Vishnu, and they appeal to Vishnu, saying, now what do we do? Because we want it for ourselves. We don't want the Asuras to get it. So then Vishnu comes as Mohini and says that, okay, I will pour out the the Amrit, and so she puts all the asuras in one line and the devas in one line, and she tells the devas that I will not be giving the asuras all of it, and she tells the asuras I will not be giving the devas all of it, and then she starts giving the devas first. So she's giving them, and then one of the asuras goes and sits with the devas, and she's giving it to them. And as she's giving, this asura also starts drinking the amrit, and then it's discovered that he's there, and so then his head is chopped off. But half of him has the amrit, the other half doesn't have the amrit. So he floats off into space, and they become Rahu and Ketu. Okay, that's how those planets are formed. And then they finish all the, I think they finish all the Amrit with themselves, by themselves. And the Asuras don't get any. And then there's this big war. So the Asuras are forever being conned by the Devas. The Devas are always trying to get the better of them. In fact, Indra is the weepy one. Whenever he finds himself in a corner, he goes crying. And he says, oh, I'm in trouble and, please help me kind of thing. So
They keep the asuras down, and they also keep down all the human beings who are like a little bit too good for them,
Yes.
too big for their boots.
There's a lot of insecurity.
Like
Yes.
the Vamana avatar is an example of
Yeah.
that, isn't
Absolutely,
it?
absolutely.
And why does Vaman have to go to put his feet on
Mahabali.
his head? Yeah.
Mahabali.
Because
Mahabali.
because
Because
Mahabali was becoming too strong. and
Mahabali
his
was
tapasya
ruling over
becoming
3 worlds,
worlds,
so he
yes.
had to be
pushed down.
pushed down.
thumbs
down.
on him, cut his head off.
Though at the same time, the gift Vishnu gave him at the end was that he said that this is not a punishment. Patal Lok is as beautiful as any other place, and I will be the guardian over there. So Vishnu stands there as the Dwarpal, for eternity, guarding.
So there's also that gatekeeper story, isn't there?
Yeah,
Jaya Vijaya.
actually, again, Vishnu, you're talking about Jaya Vijaya, the Dwarpals that you're talking about. So you'll see outside most Vishnu temples, there are these 2 gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya. And who were they? Now, they were the gatekeepers in Vaikuntha, Vishnu's home. And like all gatekeepers, they when you're the gatekeeper to a very powerful person, you get a lot of that power for yourself. So they're brothers, and one fine day, group 4 sages who are called the Kumaras come to them to seek, they want to meet Vishnu. So they stand at the gate. Now these sages have taken the appearance. I mean, this happens very often that somebody comes in the form of someone else. So these sages come as, little boys, children, maybe 9 or 10 years old or whatever. So and they say, we want to meet Vishnu. And the gatekeeper says, Jao, 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 you can't meet him, he's resting and all. So the sages being, they always give a chance. So they say, look, this is who we are and we want to meet Vishnu. And he said, the gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, say, no, go. So, all right, Sages says, no, we won't go anywhere. But you guys, for treating us like this, are definitely going to go. And go where? Go to Mrityu Lok. That's the place for you. Come become mortals. Come and spend a mortal existence. Not once. I mean, so this is the punishment that is given. Of course, these 2 start crying because who wants to leave Vaikuntha? And Vishnu hears this entire noise and racket and comes out, and he's asked to adjudicate. He says, look, what you did was wrong and they were right in punishing you. But, I feel very sorry for you. Vishnu always feels very sorry. So he says, you have 2 choices. 7 births as my devotees, 3 births
On earth.
7 births as my devotees on earth, 3 births as my
Alternative. These are the optional punishment.
optional punishment, 3 births as my enemies. And of course, they choose the second one. Not only because it's 3 births, but when you have an enemy, you are focused on that enemy. So the idea is very clear that I will be still focused on Vishnu even though he is my enemy. And they are born and they are born. So they are born in Satya Yuga as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And Hiranyaksh is killed, I think, by the Varaha avatar of Vishnu, and Hiranyakashipu is killed by the Narsimha avatar of Vishnu. So the half human, half animal deities kill the first. This is in the Satya Yuga. In the Treta Yuga, they are born as the same brothers are born as Ravan and Kumbhakarna, and it is Rama who kills them. And in the Dwapar Yuga, they are born as Shishupala and Dantavakra, and Krishna who kills them. So this is what they opted for. They asked for this, and once they have done this killing is over, they go back and resume duty on at the gates of Vaikuntha. So Earth is actually 3 rounds of a punishment posting for them, you know.
So we've talked about a range of crimes, and I'm not able to find sort of like a degree in the sense, if it's this crime you get this punishment, and if it's that crime you get that punishment. Things seem quite mixed up. I was reading like a list. I mean, I actually looked up. Okay, what are the 7 deadly sins, and what is the list of crimes according to some text, and I got. If it's the body, killing, what's not taking, what's not given, and sexual misconduct. We've covered all of those already. Speech is telling of lies, slandering others, idle gossip, harsh words. Mind is envy, wish to harm others, adherence to false views. So, I mean, stealing is something that stands out. And there is a lot of stealing also. I mean, especially stealing cows.
Yeah.
Stealing cows is a pretty large theme. I mean, I kept on running into it. Please tell us some cow stealing stories.
So
And the punishments.
yeah, the stealing of the cow is one of the worst crimes that you can do, as we know from the example of Bhishma. But that's not the only one. The cow is. It's always a divine cow, so that's where you get probably the phrase holy cow. Don't touch the holy cow at any cost, so the Bhishma story is one example, but there is also Vishwamitra who covets again Vashishta's cow. It's always Vashishta's cow because she's a marvelous cow. She can
Make gold.
yeah, she can create any kind of food. So you can have thousands of guests. Not only that, she can generate armies. So she is fabulous. And Vishwamitra at that time was not the sage that he became. This is the backstory to why he becomes the sage. He was a Raja and a Kshatriya. So he felt Vashishta who has this cow and he is treating me like a guest, getting all these fabulous foods from her and everything. But Vashishta doesn't need the cow. I need the cow because I have so many more royal duties to perform. I have people to feed, I have wars to win, and let me just take the cow. But the cow fights back. And actually, Vishwamitra loses the battle. And then he understands for himself that tapas and the spiritual power that comes from that is much more powerful than the power that kings
So
hold.
we got finally one message, guys. Note it down. Okay. But I'd love to hear a cow story from Reena also. Maybe could you tell us that Parashurama thing, the
Kartavirya Arjuna.
Yeah, so Jamdagini,
The same Renuka's husband.
Renuka, they also had. Surabhi, was it? No.
No, the
Kamdhenu.
name is not given, but she's a divine
She's
cow.
a divine cow. Yeah, she's a divine cow. And those are the days when the Kshatriyas were all powerful and
Kartavirya Arjuna.
Kartavirya Arjuna was raging over the world and killing lots of people. And he happened to land up over there. And he saw this cow and he saw the wonderful spread that was brought out for everyone. And he coveted the cow himself. So then he told, they asked for the cow. And they said, no, that we're not going to give you the cow. Jamdagni said, she's mine. I have looked after her, and I love her a lot, and I'm not going to part with her. And but this man, he just pulls her. He pulls her off, and the cow fights back here also. She pulls and she cries and she asks her, the sage, that why are you allowing them to take me? And then they come back to fight again, is it? I mean, no, wait, I'll tell you what. So
Then Parashurama comes back and he finds that
the cow is gone.
Yeah.
So then and his father's injured.
Yeah.
His father's been badly injured. So then he takes a vow. His father has been killed.
then after that he kills all the Kshatriyas 20
So Jamdagni
times.
has been killed, and then Parashurama takes a vow that he's going to kill every Kshatriya. His mother beats her breast 20 times. After her husband dies, she beats her breast 20 times. So he says that I will go around the earth 20 times and kill as many Kshatriyas as I can find those 20 times. So there's absolute bloodshed. And he kills, and he is supposed to be a Brahman, but he's only a Brahman Kshatriya mix.
Yeah, he's
is.
a Brahman Kshatriya mix, yeah.
So then he kills all of them, and that's how that bloodshed takes
But
place.
what does all this mean, you know? I mean, let's just look a little bit into this cow business. Because isn't there also the cow that goes weeping and
Yeah.
there is a bhumi involved? Do you think there's like some
Yeah, that-
ecological goings on?
Yeah.
Can somebody give us an
I
analysis?
think there is, because yes, when Bhumi is oppressed, and she's like what we see around us now, I think. I mean, if the planet had a chance, maybe she'd become a cow and go to Brahma. But so the planet is being oppressed, and animals are being murdered, and people are being killed, and there's famine and drought everywhere, and Bhumi is tired. She's really tired, and then she takes the form of a cow and she goes to Brahma and says, please do something about it, because I'm really tired. Yeah, so then is there an avatar there?
So Brahma, he
yeah,
goes
yeah.
to Vishnu.
Vishnu,
I mean, this
Vishnu.
is the raison d'etre of the entire Mahabharata as such.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, this is the source is this particular.
Bhar.
It's called Bhar Avtarana. Reducing the burden of the earth. So Vishnu comes as Krishna, and the whole fight then takes place. So that is, so as Reena said, actually the cow represents the earth, and it represents all the natural resources, and taking it for yourself is depriving others. So the whole idea of mining and other kinds of exploitation, removing, whether it's water, anything, precious minerals or whatever.
So
they
who
call.
is innocent actually in mythology? Earth is innocent. Earth is innocent.
By and large, she is.
She is our mother. She's the mother of
A
everyone.
lot of women are innocent. I mean, the ones who are getting all the no. A lot of them. I mean, we have exceptions, but in general, if you create like a whole hierarchy of the ones the most criminal to like less criminal to those who like really get hurt, injured, and oppressed, we found Earth,
Yeah.
right? And then there's
What about Sita?
And there's also a social hierarchy. Also, I mean,
There
the tribals.
So
There is a social hierarchy that's replicated. There is a hierarchy that sort of it comes from the top. You have this Indra who is always afraid somebody is going to get his throne, and so the gods are keeping down the asuras. Meanwhile, on earth, you have the people who are in the power, sort of happily dispensing with the lives of others who are less than them. It's just like a carbon copy, isn't it? So,
as there, so here.
so pretty much, if you want to understand humanity, you read mythology.
I would say yes.
I mean,
Do read it. I mean, there's no
there
harm.
has to be some reason why it's so gory. I don't understand. Without crime, we wouldn't have any mythology.
We wouldn't have any story. Look at the
We
Iliad
wouldn't have
and the
any
Odyssey.
story.
Yeah, we wouldn't be have
But
any
there is,
story.
there is one mystery story, I think, which is actually like the mystery. We're done this well, just as well. We've come to like the Ur story, which is in Kenopanishad, which is the biggest whodunit of all mythology. Because nobody knows who it is who has done it, not even the gods. So that's why Kena is by whom. So Brahman, nobody knows what, who, why. Where is Brahman? Not even the gods know. So the mystery continues, and that is our biggest whodunit. And don't ask why done it.
I never asked that. Yeah.
So we have 10
Questions?
minutes
Yeah.
for questions.
Questions, hopefully directed to the other two.
Oh,
She wanted to, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Eklavya is again one of those. Eklavya is again one of those moral wounds which are there, and as Mani and Reena have said, there is a hierarchy of power. So definitely Eklavya in Mahabharat, Shambhuka in the Ramayana, they come so low down in the hierarchy that Eklavya is like those six tribals. I mean, tribals and marginalized people in the stories have always, there's no punishment for any crime. Now, Ekalavya's crime, you know, what is it? He basically attempted to get knowledge which was not really meant for him. It's not even said that, and it's an unstated crime. So, what is the crafty punishment that is asked? Give your thumb.
I talked to an archer, an international archer, who said you don't use your thumb.
Yeah, there is a tribe in India now which call themselves descendants of Eklavya, who have learned to, who for generations do not use their thumb in using the bow and arrow.
okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's still there.
So maybe the person who gave that punishment didn't know that.
Yeah.
He was a Brahmin.
So that's the irony and the flaw of the story. Any other questions?
So very interesting how all the villains or the asuras are, tribals or Dalits. One example that comes to mind is Mahisasur. The various communities in West Bengal during Durga Puja, they sort of are in a period of mourning when Durga Puja is going on, because Mahisasur is their king, their benefactor, who is a villain in this sort of mythology. So all the asuras are dark skinned, they are non-vegetarian. Like you said, they eat cows or they eat beef. So any thoughts on that in particular?
You know, while I was doing the Ramayana for Amar Chitra Katha, I discovered that the sages were eating mutton.
Of course.
Yeah,
I've
so
heard of beef. I mean,
I have
I've not
heard of
verified
beef,
this
but
myself.
mutton, I think Brahmins have eaten, and
I think his comment was
yeah, about
Mahishasura.
about asuras and the way they are portrayed, as I think this has come from a time, historical time, I would say, when there were outsiders coming into India and making it their homes and pushing Dravidians further south and further south. And there was definitely a distinct difference between their features and their complexions. So I have a feeling historically it's come from there. That you push all the asuras down south and send them to Lanka, and they come up from there. And here you have the fair skinned. I mean, that's how I see it.
Well, actually, no matter whatever the contextual explanations, justifications, excuses, etc., I mean, we still have the future ahead of us.
Yes.
If mythological stories are being written by everybody, there is a lot of scope. I don't know why nobody really sort of goes out on a limb and takes things to more interesting areas.
You mean
And there's
continue?
a very minor change in something, and everyone's overexcited about it. They're not Shruti,
They're not.
So go for it.
You mean continuing to write mythology?
Yes,
More mythology.
why not?
Mythological noir.
Go ahead and revise.
So you could have the night of the Chakravyuh, a Rashomon style of 7 different viewpoints and the killing of Abhimanyu or whatever. That could be one.
But is this a time when we can actually rewrite mythology, or will we be lynched?
If you don't want to be punished, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The crime and punishment as to what is the crime. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you all talked about these stories where all these characters are so flawed. Even the gods are so flawed. but they are still revered and worshipped by people. So what makes them still worshipped? Like, is it like their crimes are, overpowered by the good things they have done, or what is the?
What's their secret?
Can I attempt that? Yeah. You know, I think that stories are written by people, but it doesn't really actually touch the energy of all those um, sources that they represent. So, which is why, I mean, the mantras are in a different category altogether. The thought and the spirit of deities are always inspiring. But the stories are simply a way, I feel, to engage the human mind so that we can get into it. And it sort of seems like if there's no crime, we're not going to get interested. So maybe the stories are all created with those aspects. But I don't think that the essence of any of these revered energy points and spirits are actually touched by the mythological stories.
Yes, that's true. That's a good summing up.
So, we've got just about a minute. I think there was one question. We could probably take that.
There's somebody there.
So you can be devoted and you can still read all these stories. And you can still be inspired and have a lot of bhakti.
Thank you for a great session. My question is, when we talk about crime in any context, there is a foundational principle in anthropology by Malinowski that in ethnography we have to understand a culture from within its own architecture. So when we talk about crime in mythology, shouldn't we also follow criminal codes that they operate in and not the modern understanding as we know it?
Actually, you know, there are arguments that these are allegorical, and they're not sort of meant to be taken literally. The crimes by the gods look like crimes, but they are not actually crimes because usually a larger purpose is behind the smaller, what appears like a wrongdoing, but there is a knowledge behind it or a longer vision behind it. Those are the explanations usually given, that it's allegory and it's not to be taken like that. But I mean, today we were talking about it from I guess, a legal point of view.
Yes. I mean, even the Bhagavad Gita, I mean, Arjun is asked to kill his kin, his own family, and which is something that we would not be able to accept, to kill your own father, your uncle, your brothers. But then Krishna explains that there is this larger purpose, there is this larger picture. And so we accept that.
And of course, somebody like Gandhi, of course, saw that as a war between good and evil and as an allegory.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
panelists.
Thank you for letting us just ramble on.